Ridley Atchebe handed his wife the divorce papers on a Tuesday evening in November, not in a lawyer's office, not across a kitchen table, where two people might have at least spoken honestly, but in the front sitting room of the Atchebe family home, while his mother stood beside the fireplace, with her arms folded, and his girlfriend sat on the settee like she was already measuring the drapes for herself. Cora Whitfield Atchebe, 36-year-old wife of Ridley, and the woman who had quietly held more than anyone in that room understood, stood near the hallway with her coat still on. No one had offered to take it. No one had offered her a seat. The room smelled of Odil's expensive perfume and the particular cold that seeps into old houses in November and stays. Ridley Atchebe, 41-year-old heir and acting president of Atchebe Infrastructure Group, held the envelope with both hands like something he had already decided before entering the room. His face was carefully blank, which told Cora more than anger would have. Odile Atchebe, 69-year-old matriarch of the Atchebe family, and the woman who had spent 30 years deciding who belonged in her son's life, stood behind him with the stillness of someone who had rehearsed this. Farron Crane, 33, niece of Cyrus Crane, and the woman Odile had been positioning at Ridley's side for the better part of 6 months, sat with her ankles crossed and a small smile she made no effort to conceal. Ridley said, "I need you to understand this isn't something I've decided lightly." Cora looked at the envelope. "Then why does it look like something Odile decided for you?" The room went quiet. Odile drew a sharp breath. Farron's smile didn't change, but her eyes did. Ridley set the envelope on the side table. "You can take the evening to read through it. The meeting with council is Thursday morning." Cora looked at him for a long moment, at the man she had married 7 years ago in a small outdoor ceremony on a lake north of the city, at the man who had once held her hand through her father's illness, and again at the graveside, at the man who had now arranged his own mother and his own affair into one room and called it a conversation. She picked up the envelope. She did not scream, she did not beg, she did not give them the satisfaction of watching her come apart in that sitting room, while November pressed against the windows and Farron Crane sat on the settee like she had already won. Because here is what Ridley Atchebe did not know. His wife was the beneficial owner of Northgate Capital, a private infrastructure investment fund established through the Whitfield Family Fund, named after her late father, James Whitfield, the same man who had spent his working life buying distressed companies, stabilizing them, and returning them to the workers who kept them alive. Ridley did not know that Northgate Capital had been in confidential acquisition talks with Atchebe Infrastructure Group for 4 months. He did not know that the woman he was handing divorce papers to was the entity already in position to purchase and save the company he was quietly drowning. He thought letting her go would simplify his life. He had only removed the last protection he had. 3 weeks before the sitting room, Cora had been standing on the floor of Atchebe Infrastructure's fabrication yard in Mississauga, when the pressure gauge on the old compressor unit spiked red. She had been there the way she was always there, quietly, unofficially, in a plain jacket with a clipboard that didn't belong to any official department. To the workers, she was just Ridley's wife, the one who actually remembered their names, who asked after their kids and recalled the answers the next time she came around. Sol Mitra, 56-year-old operations manager and a man who had worked that yard for 23 years, crossed the floor toward her while the alarm was still sounding. He had grease on his sleeve and the specific worry of someone who has been watching a machine fail in a way he has been warning about for months. "We put in the compressor replacement request back in February," Sol said. Response was that it would go to next quarter's review. Cora looked at the gauge. Who made that call? Sol glanced toward the administrative offices above the yard floor. Same person who's been drawing from capital reserves without telling the floor supervisors what's left. Cora already knew. She had read the same numbers in a confidential due diligence report that had come through Northgate's acquisition team. The compressor, the payroll shortfall, the overdue account with the primary steel supplier, the 2 outstanding insurance claims. Ridley kept pushing to the following quarter's agenda. She knew all of it from 2 directions at once. She could not say that. Not yet. The independent directors on Atchebe Infrastructure's board had opened a quiet sale process after the company's lender flagged a covenant breach. Northgate had submitted the strongest rescue offer, but because Cora was Ridley's wife, her legal team had insisted the process stay clean. No leaks, no pressure, no move that could be challenged on conflict grounds later. The beneficial owner of the fund would be disclosed formally, in the boardroom at the right moment, in front of everyone who needed to hear it. So she asked like a concerned wife, "How long before that unit is completely finished?" Sol looked toward the offices. Depends whether anyone upstairs is willing to look at the actual numbers. Patience Ngozi, 59, a pipe fitter who had been with Achibi Infrastructure for 27 years and whose retirement was tied entirely to the company's pension, pressed one hand flat against her chest as the alarm silenced. She caught Cora's eye across the yard and gave her a tired nod. Cora nodded back. She did not mention the call she had made 2 weeks earlier to one of Northgate's supplier contacts, a quiet word that had extended Achibi's steel credit by 60 days without anyone having to understand why. That was how she helped, softly, privately, without making kindness into something she could display. Inside Ridley's office that same afternoon, she found him on the phone with a creditor, voice raised, papers pushed to the edge of his desk. When he saw Cora in the doorway, he covered a folder with his forearm, as if she hadn't already clocked the motion. She looked at his hand. Beneath it, the edge of a financing proposal from Crane Holdings was visible. "How bad is it?" she asked. Ridley exhaled through his nose. "It's not your area, Cora." The words came without cruelty. They came with the quiet dismissal of a man who had simply never thought to ask his wife what her area actually was. She looked at the Crane Holdings folder. "If you're looking at outside financing, you need Marion to review the covenant language before you sign anything." "Marion works for the company," Ridley said. "Cyrus Crane is offering the family a solution. There's a difference." Cora looked at the folder one more time. Then she left him to it. In the hallway, her phone buzzed. Isaac Forrest, 47, her attorney and the only person outside her private board who knew both sides of her life, spoke in a low voice. "Northgate's team wants your final authorization to proceed toward close," he said. "The independent committee has the offer. Marion's office has the conflict disclosures. If Northgate completes the acquisition before Crane locks anything down, you save the workers and absorb the debt cleanly." Cora looked back through the glass at Ridley. He was staring at the Crane Holdings folder with the expression of a man choosing the comfortable answer over the true one. "Not yet," she said. "If he finds out before the committee finishes its review, he'll block it out of pride or go straight to Odile." Isaac paused. "Cora, you are working to save a man who doesn't know you're holding the rope." She closed her eyes. A memory rose without asking. She was 12 years old, walking beside her father through a facility in Hamilton, watching him stop to ask a floor worker his name and how his wife's surgery had gone. James Whitfield had not been a man who bought companies for trophies. He had built a fund to protect the people inside them. He had once told her, standing outside a plant he had spent 8 months stabilizing, "The company is only worth saving if the people inside it are worth protecting." She had carried that into her marriage. She had tried to carry it into his. "Tell Quine to begin the review on Crane Holdings," she said, quietly. "Documents only. I want evidence, not rumor." The night she saw Ridley with Farron, she had driven to the Achibi family home to drop off materials for one of Odile's committee events. She had not been invited to stay. She had never, in 7 years, been invited to stay. She came through the side door she still had a key for and heard laughter from the back sitting room. She followed the sound. Farron Crane was standing very close to Ridley near the window. Odile was behind them watching with the satisfied expression of a woman whose plan was proceeding ahead of schedule. Farron said something low, and Ridley laughed. A real laugh, loose and easy, the kind Cora had not heard from him in almost a year. Odile saw Cora first. "Well," Odile said, "that saves us a longer conversation." Cora stood in the doorway and looked at the scene completely. Farron did not step away. She met Cora's eyes with the steady patience of someone who had already been told this moment would come. Ridley's face went red. "This isn't what?" "I can see what it is," Cora said. Her voice was even. She was surprised by how even it was. Odile folded her hands. "Cora, you've always been a dignified woman. I think you know this has been coming for some time." Farron tilted her head slightly. "Some partnerships simply run their course." Cora looked at Ridley. He looked at the floor. That was his answer. She turned and left. In the car she locked the door and called Isaac. Her hands were not quite steady. Her voice was. "He's been with her longer than I thought," she said. Isaac was quiet. "Then do you want to pause the acquisition?" Cora looked back at the lit windows of the Achi house. 3 silhouettes inside, all still and warm. She could imagine Odile's hand on Ridley's arm. She could imagine what was being said. "No," Cora said, "move forward, exactly as planned." By the time the sitting room happened and the envelope was placed on the side table, Cora already knew what she needed to know. Kwame Asante, 42-year-old investigator who handled Isaac's corporate due diligence work, had confirmed that Crane Holdings had executed the same pattern before, 5 companies in 7 years, all in distress, all approached with fast money and personal relationships, all restructured into near-empty ownership within 18 months. Workers reduced, assets transferred, contracts redirected, buildings sold. Farron's personal wealth was built almost entirely on leveraged paper, pledged real estate, borrowed social standing, a family name that opened boardrooms but no real capital behind it. Cyrus Crane wanted access to Achibi Infrastructure's Northern Corridor contracts. That was what this had always been about. The morning after the sitting room, Cora sat in Isaac's office before the city had properly woken up, her tea going cold on the desk. "Let Ridley believe he's being generous," Isaac said. "The premarital financial disclosure he signed when you married listed the Whitfield Fund as a legacy holding. He didn't ask what was inside it." "Odile told him my father's accounts were probably modest," Cora said. "She called them sentimental. He signed because he thought they weren't worth reading about." "That arrogance," Isaac said, "now protects you." Cora looked out the window at November in the city. She thought about who she had been when she married Ridley, a woman who had almost told him everything, who had sat across from him once in a small office near the fabrication yard and nearly said, "My father left me something significant. I can help you in ways you haven't thought to imagine." She had seen the pride in his eyes and the fear underneath it, and she had decided that love might be safer without money standing between them. She understood now what she had misread. Ridley had not loved being equals. He had loved believing she was lesser. She signed the separation agreement 3 days later, in a conference room with Isaac beside her, and Ridley sitting across the table, looking like a man who had convinced himself that what he was doing was measured and fair. Farron sat at his side. No explanation was offered for her presence. "There's no reason this needs to be complicated," Ridley's solicitor said. "Ridley is being fair about the settlement." Cora looked at Ridley. "He's being quiet about the company," she said. "Ask me how that's going." Ridley looked at the table. "Don't make this into something it isn't." Farron tilted her chin. "Some chapters have to close before the next can begin." She said it like she was offering kindness, like this was a gift. Isaac's phone lit up on the table. Kwame's message. "Crane Holdings made an attempt to access internal Achibi financial data through an outside contact prior to acquisition approval. Evidence package secured." Cora's hands steadied. She signed where she was asked to sign. Ridley signed with something that looked like relief. His solicitor gathered the papers. In the hallway on the way out, in the single moment when Farron had stepped ahead and Odile wasn't in the corridor, Ridley looked at Cora and asked, "Will you be all right?" Cora looked at the man she had once loved. "I was all right before you knew me, Ridley," she said. "You just never thought to ask why." She walked toward the elevator. Isaac fell in beside her. "The board meeting is in 48 hours, he said. "The independent committee opens with the ownership disclosure. Ridley's packet is sealed until Prescott calls the meeting to order." Cora did not look back. "Give them 48 hours to feel certain," she said. "Then we walk in." The boardroom of Achibi Infrastructure Group was arranged for a formality when Cora arrived. Clean folders at every seat. Marion Chu, 51-year-old outside counsel for Achibi Infrastructure, seated beside the independent directors. Prescott Hale, 72-year-old board chairman who had served alongside Ridley's father for 15 years, at the head of the table with his hands folded. 2 auditors from the firm engaged during the conflict review, seated near the wall with sealed binders. Sol Mitra, present as operations witness at the committee's request, looking uncomfortable in his good jacket, and sitting with the rigid dignity of a man who belongs somewhere else, but came because it mattered. Ridley sat near the head of the table with prepared remarks in front of him and the confident expression Odile had spent months helping him rebuild. Farron sat at his right in a cream blazer. Odile sat just behind him, close enough to prompt. Cyrus Crane, 60-year-old head of Crane Holdings, sat with his leather folder and the expression of a man expecting to collect something before noon. A photographer Odile had arranged stood near the back wall. Ridley had not known about the photographer. That detail told Cora exactly how thoroughly Odile had planned the morning. Ridley's paper bent in his grip when Cora walked in. "What is she doing here?" he said. Prescott Hale rose. "Mrs. Whitfield Achibi is present by right of the acquisition process." Ridley looked at Prescott. "By what right specifically?" Farron smiled at Cora, the same small smile from the sitting room, the same patience of someone who believed she already knew the ending. "Yes," Farron said. "By what right?" Cora looked at her directly. "Northgate." One word. It landed flat and without decoration, and it filled the room like cold water. Prescott opened the folder in front of him, and read in the steady voice of a man who has delivered difficult news before and understands the importance of doing it without drama. Cora Whitfield Achebe is the controlling beneficial owner of Northgate Capital, the acquiring entity selected by the independent committee to purchase and stabilize Achebe Infrastructure Group, subject to today's final board approvals. Ridley's mouth opened. No sound came. O'Deal gripped the edge of the table with both hands. Farron's smile disappeared so completely it was as if it had never been there. Cyrus Crane went very still. Cora took the seat reserved for Northgate's controlling representative. Not near the wall, not by the door, not in a chair someone had pushed aside. At the table, in the room, where she had always belonged. She looked at Ridley across the length of that table and watched every memory rearrange itself inside him. Cora asking about the supplier accounts. Cora warning him about the compressor. Cora noticing the Crane Holdings folder. Cora saying, "Have Marion review the covenants." His own voice flat and certain, "It's not your area." Isak opened his briefcase. Kwame placed a sealed evidence file on the table. Marion Chu confirmed the ownership records with a nod. "The Whitfield family fund predates the marriage by 11 years, Marion said. "The separation agreement signed 3 days ago confirms that Mr. Achebe holds no claim over fund-held assets." Ridley flinched. The divorce he had arranged to free himself had also locked him out of the only rescue coming. "Before you thank your new investors," Cora said, her voice quiet, "you should know who they are." Isak presented the evidence in 4 points, cleanly and without theatrics. Crane Holdings had executed the same predatory pattern in 5 confirmed acquisitions. Cyrus Crane had received internal Achebe financial information from O'Deal Achebe before the formal financing discussions, information not authorized for external release. Farron Crane had pursued a personal relationship with Ridley Achebe, while her family's company was simultaneously seeking acquisition leverage. Ridley had advanced preliminary discussions with Crane Holdings without disclosing the personal conflict to his board. O'Deal's voice when she found it was sharp. "This is personal. This is a rejected wife using lawyers to punish a family." Cora turned to her. "Personal would have been easy," she said. "This is corporate governance." Those 4 words ended the argument so completely that even Cyrus Crane seemed to understand that the room had closed. Farron tried. She stood and told the table that Cora was acting from grief, that emotion was being dressed in legal language, that anyone who looked clearly could see what was really happening here. Quam placed a printed message in front of Prescott Hale. Prescott read it aloud. "Once Ridley is secured, his mother will manage the family angle. The wife is quiet. She will fold." The room went cold. Farron looked at Cyrus. Cyrus did not look back. His eyes were on the folders, counting whatever exits were still available to him. Prescott cleared his throat and announced the committee's findings and recommendations. Crane Holdings' proposal was rejected in full. Any further communications from Crane Holdings regarding the acquisition would proceed exclusively through Marion's office. Ridley Achebe was suspended from executive authority pending a conflict disclosure review. O'Deal Achebe was removed from any advisory capacity and barred from company premises during the transition period. Northgate Capital's acquisition plan was approved subject to the governance conditions specified in the packet before each director. Farron leaned toward Ridley. Her voice was low enough to be private. The room was quiet enough to make it public. "You told me she had nothing." Ridley said nothing. He sat with his prepared remarks still folded in his hand and no one left to deliver them to. Cora opened the final page of her folder. Her voice did not waver. "Solmitra will oversee operations through the first restructuring stage, reporting to the transition committee. The compressor unit in the fabrication yard will be replaced before end of month. Payroll will be stabilized by Friday. No positions will be eliminated in the first stage of the acquisition." Sol lowered his head. He pressed his mouth into a hard line and looked at the table, and that look said everything he would not say out loud. Across the room, when Isaac quietly informed Patience Gozi what had just been confirmed, Patience covered her face with both hands. She stood with her eyes closed and breathed, the long, released breath of someone who has been holding the same one for most of a year and has finally been allowed to let it go. She did not cheer. She did not say anything at all. She only stood there and breathed. Ridley approached Cora near the window when the others began gathering their things. The room was clearing around them. He stood with his hands open at his sides, the way a man stands when he has nothing left to hold. "Was any of it real?" he asked. His voice was smaller than she had ever heard it. Cora looked at him. The steadiness in her face cracked, not enough for tears, just enough to show him what was underneath it. Yes, she said, that was the hardest part of all of this. He swallowed. I made mistakes. You built a marriage, she said, where everyone in your family had a voice except your wife. That's not a mistake. That's a choice you made every single day. She reached into her jacket pocket and placed her wedding ring on the boardroom table between them. The plain gold band she had worn for 7 years. Ridley looked at it without reaching for it. I loved the man you were when you were afraid of losing your father's company, and you still looked at me like I was someone you could trust, she said. I don't know the man who needed me to be small before he could feel large. She left the ring where it was and walked out. The fabrication yard was visible through the long windows at the end of the corridor. Workers had gathered near the floor entrance, waiting uncertain, reading the building's mood the way people who work in a place always can. Sol was already down there. When Cora appeared on the upper walkway, he looked up and gave her one slow nod. Patience saw her and pressed one hand flat to her sternum, the same gesture she had made beside the failing compressor 3 weeks earlier. Cora took the stairs down. The air was cold the way it is always cold in November in a Canadian industrial building, cold that holds itself against you and does not make apologies. But the equipment was still running. The people were still there. Sol met her at the bottom of the stairs. They want to hear it from you, he said. They will, she said. She walked onto the floor. Around her the machines ran the way they had run for 27 years. She thought about her father standing outside a facility in Hamilton, pointing at the floor and not the sign above the door. Fall in love with how people are treated inside it. The name on the building no longer belonged to the people who had put it at risk. It belonged to the people who had shown up every single day, believing in something that deserved to be protected. Cora Whitfield-Achie had been quiet for a long time. She had been patient and careful and largely unseen. That part was finished now.